What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial series, we are going to be going over a lot of menu improvements, UI navigation improvements, and fixing some bugs with things like our command list, pause menu, and practice settings. So when we come into the game here, we can pause and go to our command list, for example. The first issue you will notice is that the videos are not playing in Unreal Engine 5 using the method that we set up in the Unreal Engine 4 version. Another issue you will notice is that when we are moving through our command list here, while that works, it's actually moving the pause menu as well. So if I am to press the confirm button on here, it takes me back to the main menu. That's because it was moving where I was at on the pause menu, which it shouldn't do, right? If we pause the game, go to the command list, and go down one and then back out, you'll notice I am now on the rematch button. But we should have remained on the command list button because we weren't on the pause menu, we were on the command list. We had the ability to do this with something that we set up earlier in the series, but we never fully implemented it. So today we're going to fully implement it, and we're going to take out some hacks that we've had in the series for a while, which is going to clean up our code base quite a bit and also fix current issues and prevent future issues. So I'm going to do a lot of this live today because of the nature of the changes, but by the end of this episode we'll have a very nice result for a lot of our UI navigation. If you're interested in checking out everything that we have in this fighter, you can go ahead and click this link in the top right corner right here, which is the entire playlist for the fighting game tutorial series. Alternatively, if you only care about UI navigation and improving your menus, that's perfectly fine. I will link you to this episode right here, which is where we initially set up the pause menu, which is where the majority of our fixes are going to come into place today. But with those out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This series is a code and blueprint tutorial series, but we're going to be doing almost everything in the blueprints today because we're going to be cleaning up our widgets, which are done in blueprint. So what I want to do is show you the current widget variable that we made in a previous episode and what it does. Then we're going to go into all the widgets, make sure they're setting the current widget variable correctly. So let's go into code to start. So if we go to our base player controller.h and scroll down to our variables, we have one called current widget. The current widget that player is controlling, and it's just a type uWidget pointer. So we want to go to our blueprint function library, functional BPs, base function library. So in here we can add functions that we're going to call from pretty much anywhere, specifically our widgets, and we're going to set our current widget variable. So let's make a new function in here, and we'll call it set current widget. Technically, you could have it wherever we're calling this widget gets set to the current widget variable, but I'm going to pass in a widget anyway, just to be on the safe side in case you want to call this from somewhere else. So widget, object reference, active widget, and we're going to need to get our player controller. Now for this, we can always assume that player controller index 0 is the one we want. There are going to be a few instances where that's not entirely correct, like the character select screen, the stage select screen. Those are both things that player 2 can interact with. So be aware of that, but for now this is going to work. We're going to already be touching a lot in today's episode. But when we're getting a player controller, we need to pass in a world context object because this is not an actor, and thus we need some reference of the current world. So I'm going to pass in world context, and the player index of 0 is perfectly fine for this. Now the return value is going to be a player controller object reference. We want to cast that to our base player controller because our base player controller is the one that has the reference to the current widget. Now I want to drag off base player controller and set current widget right here. And we're going to set it to the active widget that was passed into the function that we're calling set current widget right here. Now we want to go to every single widget that we have that can be active. So we don't need to go things like the input buffer because the input buffer isn't controlled by the character, or rather the player, but instead it's just there to visualize information for the player. So if we go to widgets, menus, we can go through our large list and start calling this function. So the achievement ones are a pretty special case. The tile rows, the tiles, and the list itself aren't necessary to set as our current widget if we really don't want to because they're all part of the profile, and the profile would be the active widget, so it's not required that you do this here. So I'm actually going to skip them for now. There is a possibility we may want to have the achievement list completely separate from the profile in the future, in which case we could update this. But let's not complicate things. Now the character select screen is definitely one that we'll want to set. So if we go into our graph here and go to event construct, where this widget is created, which is here. We have a lot in here already. We could put it at the start or the end. It doesn't really matter. You can tell we're listening for input actions in a lot of places. I'm just going to call it at the very end of the function to keep things simple. I'll do that for every widget that we touch today, unless there's a reason not to. So we're going to call set current widget. It's from our base function library, and we're going to pass in self. Now, this combination nodes is really what we're going to be doing today, so I'm going to copy that. And one other thing we want to do in here is make sure that wherever current widget is set already, we either remove it or just keep it in mind. So you can see we've set it in the session list and the controller mapping pop-up. So those are the only ones we have to worry about today. The rest we can just go ahead and add this functionality to. Now, very simply, if we come into the game here and look for base player controller, you'll see that there is one here by default. Click on that and we can go to the current widget. It says none right now. When we go into the character select screen, this should now update to be the character select screen, and it does. So this is just one case. This is going to happen for all of our widgets if we've done it correctly, but just be aware that's what you want to see. As long as you see that, we are good to go. Let's go through the rest of our widgets. This time I'm going to go a lot quicker because we do have a lot to get through. Command list. We're going to go to event construct, go to the end, which is actually as this for each loop completes right here. And we're going to paste our two nodes that we copied from before. Compile and save. We can skip command list element as that is part of the command list. It itself is not the active widget. Control mapping pop-up. So for this one, it is part of a different widget, but we do actually handle behavior in here for it. And in here is where we were setting the current widget before, based off the controller reference, but actually that's not required now. Now, if we find references on the controller reference, you'll see that we set it here and we get it down here to reset current widget. So we have to be a little bit more careful with this one. So starting out, we want to remove everything from event construct, and we will just call our new behavior here, and that will work. Now, for the other place where we were using controller reference, which was down here at the end of event any key, instead of setting this controller reference directly, we can actually still call our function that we have here, set current widget, and put it in its place, but instead, don't pass in self. Leave active widget as null pointer. The problem with that is that it doesn't actually assign it to the proper widget afterward. However, we actually have a solution for this as well. So there's an owner widget in this widget, and that is the widget that created this controller mapping pop-up. So instead of leaving it null, we can actually use the owner widget as the active widget. So basically, once this pop-up is gone, we're setting the current widget back to the owner widget. So there we go. And we can remove the controller reference at this point as it's actually not being used anymore. Credits. Credits should be a widget that is handling its own behavior. We're going to go to the end of event construct here. So this one is a little bit more complicated because of all the crazy stuff going on here. But to keep things nice and simple, we're still just going to put it at the very end of the logic, and that would be here after we play the event animation. So I'm going to add set current widget here, and all of these are going to connect to it through a reroute node. And then we will just organize this a little bit. And something like that should do the trick. Currency details, nope. Currency gain, nope. Exit game pop-up, technically you could, and we probably should, even though this widget is incredibly tiny. So let's go ahead and do it. Go to our event graph, end of event construct, paste our nodes. Next is input device disconnected. So whenever we have this up, our input device was disconnected and we need to reconnect. This definitely could be handled by the current widget. Doesn't have to be. We don't do anything in here The player controller itself actually handles when we remove this widget, so I'm going to ignore this one for now, but feel free to add it if you'd like. Level select screen. This one definitely needs it. At the end of event construct, should be right here. We have this completed of the for each loop, and we're calling move selection. We want to call set current widget. Next, we have our loading icon, not required, but the loading screen, you could add it if you want. The loading screen doesn't have any input at the current time, although you could add something like swapping through tips while you're at the loading screen. So feel free to add it if you'd like. We'll go ahead and do it because why not? The end of event construct here, just call set current widget. Main menu screen. Event construct. Now there's two spots that need it on here because we have this news pop-up, which only comes up if there are new news entries. Nothing before this is a branch. However, this part is, and we want to do it on both true and false. So because I'm putting everything at the end, I'm going to make it look like this. But as always, feel free to customize these blueprints to your liking. That way you understand what's going on. News pop-up. This one does have user input to close it, so we want to go to event construct on here. It should be right here. And we'll add this in. Player profile. This one definitely does have user input, and this is what I was talking about earlier with the achievements. This is controlling the achievements screen. It is part of this widget switcher. The statistics, achievements, and match history all are. So I'm making sure the player profile is the one with the current widget right now. And we have practice settings. This one isn't really finished yet. We've only started this one, but we want to do the same thing here. So at the end of event construct, set the current widget. Practice settings row is part of practice settings. It does not need to have current widget. Press any key screen should have this because it does listen for user input. So here is event construct. Here is the end of it after setting the timer. Put that in there. Now this is super ugly. I'm going to space it out like that. And there we go. Profile statistics, that's part of the player profile. I will ignore it for now. Saving icon, not required. Session list. Session list is one of the ones that does actually have it set. So if we come in here, I'm sure we will be able to find it. And you can see we're setting current widget in here in event construct already. Now, of course that's useful, and we do need this, but I'm going to take all this out, move everything over. And now my event construct looks like this. We're going to add on our set current widget here from the blueprint function library, just to keep things consistent. You could have left the old method in there, but the more we branch our logic and differentiate things between widgets, the harder it's going to be to follow it. So doing that just makes it a little bit easier. Session list is good to go. Session list element is part of session list. It is not required. Session list results pop-up doesn't actually have any input either. This is just visuals for the player, and it hides automatically, so we don't have to add a current widget to that. Settings screen definitely has user input, and we want to use it. So let's go to our event graph, and event construct is this one. So we go to the very end of it. This is a for loop, and we have this completed here. So on completed of the for loop, we want to set current widget. Now, we have the side selection screen. This is something in progress. I haven't gone over this through a video yet, so I do want to add it to here, but we'll do that when we cover that. Widget. Store item icon is part of the store widget, so not required. Store item pop-up actually does have user input because it's confirming if you want to purchase this or not. This could definitely be handled through the store itself, kind of like how we're doing player profile. But because of the nature of this one, I actually do want to add it. And when we get into more store behavior, I will explain why, because I have a few ideas in my head for that now. Store row is part of the store widget, but doesn't have any input by the user. Store widget itself, of course, does. So let's go in here and go to the event graph. Then go to event construct, which should be this one, and it is. This is actually the last for loop right here, this for each loop, and we have it completed for that already. So we want to go ahead and set it right here. Then we have the versus end pop-up and the versus pause menu. Versus end pop-up does have player input. So event construct right here. Then we have the versus pause menu. And this one, let's go to event construct. And we'll call it right here at the very end. Alright, now that's pretty much everything. Now, this is almost the end. I have a few more in my HUD, so if I go to my HUD, I have my change control screen. And we were just talking about this one, so let's go into the graph. And let's go to the event graph. And we want to go to construct. Go to the very end of it. This one has a for loop. It's completed. Goes into the loop body and calls all this stuff. That's all well and good, but actually we want to handle the current widget on the completed section here. So simply enough, we can actually just call it right here if we want. And there we go. So on completed of this for loop, we're going to set this to be the current widget. Those should be all the widgets if I remember correctly. So we should be able to load up our game, go to our base player controller, and look at the current widget, and it should match what we're doing. So we have press any key screen, main menu. News pop-up actually came after this, so we do have to fix that one, because this just says main menu right now. If I go into one of these, it should say character select, and then skipping this, I should go to level select. If I back out of these, go to my profile, it should say player profile. Now, it's going to stay on player profile while I'm changing between these for now. That's perfectly fine, that's what we intend. Settings, store, credits, quit. So everything looks good except for the news pop-up. Let's go and update that. So let's go to our main menu screen. Go to the graph. So we were creating the news pop-up here. And when this is created, the event construct on the news pop-up is going to run. And it's going to set the current widget to main menu screen after that point. So actually I need to update this logic. Remember I combined the logic here. It's technically incorrect. We do want to set the current widget in both these cases, but not the way I've done it. So if this branch returns false, there are no news entries. We don't display the news entries. So we want to set the current widget to be self, main menu. Something like that. However, if the news pop-up widget is created, we're not going to set it in the main menu screen because the news pop-up is going to create it. So if we look at this now, press any key screen, news pop-up. When we close this, it's not going to go to main menu. But we can do it the same way we did it with the controller mapping. Now let's go to the news pop-up. Go to the graph. The creator widget reference is the main menu screen. So when we exit out of this news pop-up, which is right here, we're using the creator widget reference to disable a news pop-up and remove it from the parent. Before we remove it from the parent, let's go to the creator widget reference, get that, paste our little logic in here now, pass the creator widget reference into the set current widget. And we only want to do that if the creator widget reference is valid, which we check for right here. So if it's not valid, we're going to skip this part, but if it is valid, we're going to set this here. This should always be valid for the main menu. This check is just for if we have somewhere else we display news and there is no creator widget reference for any reason. That shouldn't really be the case, but just keep that in mind. So now when we come in here and load up, we go to our base player controller. News pop up. When I close this, it goes to the main menu. Now we technically want to check our in-game ones as well, so if I skip through everything here, it goes to the loading screen properly. And then I can pause, and it goes to the versus pause menu. If I go into the command list, it says command list. When we go out from the command list, it doesn't go back to the versus pause menu though. So you probably know what we need to do now. We need to go to command list. We go to our graph view, and we were setting current widget here when we're creating the current widget, but when we close the command list, we need to set it back to the versus pause menu if that's where we accessed it from. The command list doesn't have an owning pause widget though, or just an owning widget in general, so we should make one. If we go to our variables, make a new widget, and let's just set this to the widget type, widget object reference, owning widget. We can make it instance editable and expose on spawn. That way we can change it in the blueprint. Now we have to determine where we create this widget. So create widget, command list, and go to find in all blueprints. You'll see we only create it from the versus pause menu. If we go to this section and refresh the node, we now have this owning widget. Owning widget is going to be self in this case. Get a reference to self. So the versus pause menu is the owning widget of the command list. So now when we go back to the command list, we can use that variable when closing the command list. So back here, where we're removing it from the parent. So get the owning widget, convert it to a validated get. Only if it's valid do we want to use this owning widget to set as the current widget. Then we want to remove it from the parent. If it's not valid, we still want to remove it from the parent, but we're not going to set the current widget. Now we're good to go here. We can try this again. Versus, let's go back to the menu where we can see this, skip through everything, base player controller 0, and pause it. Go to the command list. It says command list, but when we back out, it goes back to the versus pause menu. When we go back to the main menu, it's going to loading screen, and then it's going to go to main menu. So perfect. We've covered everything that we want to cover. You can also look at like settings. We can go over to controls. It goes to the change controls. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it made you feel a lot more confident in your UI navigation and our game as a whole. If you did enjoy, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and it lets me know you guys are enjoying this type of content so I can make more of it. If you're interested in supporting the channel and getting rewards for doing so, like so many kind souls on the screen already have, you can check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions. If you ran into any trouble while following this tutorial, feel free to join the Discord community. The support is completely free. There's a link in the description, and we'd be happy to help you out. Help you and get you all sorted. Otherwise, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.